Let's see, what's something no one has asked for? Maybe comparing different aspects of technology to the houses of Game of Thrones? I mean, sure, we could have done that before the show ended, but I still think it's a great idea. Okay, well, social media, clearly House Lannister, right? Seemingly resplendent in riches, but ultimately hollow on the inside and destined for self-destruction. The open source community, meanwhile, would probably be like the wildlings beyond the wall, initially feared by the more respectable houses of the South as the destroyer of civilization, only to be co-opted to defeat a greater threat. I guess then in this scenario, something like Microsoft is House Stark and the White Walkers are patent trolls? Yeah, that works. So who would have the unenviable position of being the Greyjoys? Well, that would be augmented reality, because what is dead may never die. As for checksum, here we stand. So the idea of augmented reality has a long history in technology, and especially in science fiction. You have things like Robot Vision, Terminator, showing the idea of having a computer overlay on top of what the eye is seeing. My first exposure to the idea was that Star Trek The Next Generation episode, The Game, where an AR game brainwashes everyone and somehow the teen is the only person on board who doesn't want to play an addictive video game. Also bonus, early Ashley Judd cameo. But when AR went from being a trope in sci-fi, or at best a terrible CES demo, to something that approached a consumer device, was undoubtedly Google Glass. Ever since Google co-founder Sergey Brin skydived into Google I/O wearing one of these devices, it changed the feel of the category from more of an if to when wearable AR was a thing. Then something happened. People actually got their hands on these first generation wearable AR devices, and the first impressions were not kind, to put it mildly. Google Glass got a special kind of ire. Maybe it was because of its $1,500 starting price. Maybe it was the fact that you needed an invite to have the opportunity to give Google money for what was clearly an early adopter device. Maybe because its aggressively sci-fi appearance was, well, kind of dorky. But most people seem to take issue with the fact that it included an eye-level camera that gave no indication of when it was in use. I can't see why people think that would be problematic. From its initial Glass Explorer private beta release in 2013 to the more open availability in May 2014, the story of Google Glass on the consumer level effectively ends in 2015 with the end of the Glass Explorer program. At the time, lots of outlets were quick to point that Glass was being just too early to market and an unfinished product at the core of it. But then something else happened. It turns out that Glass had found a home and applications all over the enterprise. Glass was successful enough in the enterprise to generate its own SKU, the very creatively named Google Glass Enterprise Edition. This was originally released in 2017 exclusively for fleet sales to large organizations and was successful enough to call for an updated second edition in 2019. And Google isn't the only one. Microsoft took a more cautious approach to its HoloLens AR headset, issuing pretentious invites and pricing it clearly at developers with a developer edition at $3,000, not to mention a total lack of skydiving. Whether they learned from Google Glass or not, Microsoft made the wise move of never really presenting HoloLens as something you would wear around all the time, instead making the form factor clearly designed for shorter-term sessions within a closed environment. Part of that was technical limitations, but a conscious choice by Microsoft. Of course, being a tech company, for every boring productivity app, they couldn't help themselves and also made sure there were plenty of consumer-facing demos, like games and media experiences. This was partly to tie it into the whole Windows mixed reality platform that was launching at the time, but it had the unfortunate effect of whetting people's appetite for a consumer edition. While HoloLens is now solidly in its second edition, released in early 2019, some of the tech press are quick to say that it's a failed or dead AR platform. But again, we see Microsoft finding buyers in the enterprise. That's where they're targeting them. And even actual AR failures seem confident that a pivot to the enterprise can be a saving grace. In the AR hype cycle, there is perhaps no more shameless player than the vaporware experts at Magic Leap. Backed by billions in venture funding and breathless descriptions of what their tech could do, Magic Leap was always eventually targeted as a consumer device. Even as actual glimpses of their technology were fleeting and the impressions were always very qualified enthusiasm. And although a consumer edition was eventually released in 2018 as some bizarre AT&T exclusive device, in April the company announced it was laying off half its staff and abandoning its consumer plans. Their CEO actually just stepped down. Instead, the company plans to continue to, repeat with me now, shift to the enterprise. So why does AR seem to work so well for the enterprise but not consumers? Well, enterprises are able to focus on what they want to get out of an AR platform. An expensive wearable AR platform is a big ask for a consumer, especially compared to a smartphone. Consumers are used to a fairly open app ecosystem where they have a surfeit of choice for what they want the platform to do. AR, due to the lack of developers and a limitation of wearable technology in general, has both a performance and utility shortfall. Plus, let's not underemphasize the importance of aesthetics. These devices generally look cringeworthy versus the very sleek and polished phone landscape they've had a decade to perfect it. There's a reason that where AR is generally successful with consumers, it's kind of in single-use novelty apps, where you see someone open up their phone, you know exactly the experience you want, you lay that couch out in the IKEA app, rather than something more open where you have to bring something to it. Enterprises are literally designed to overcome all of these shortcomings. From a utility standpoint, enterprises have use cases in mind when considering these platforms. For them, it's not really an open platform that needs to justify itself, it's a development platform with a unique UI. Development isn't a problem because in most cases, enterprises are developing the software that will run on these devices. There's no software gap to really overcome, or at least one that enterprises aren't already comfortable dealing with. Right now, the big verticals adopting AR are healthcare, oil and gas, mining, and defense, where they can find a niche in helping to train massive workforces as well as streamline routine tasks, things like maintenance that are more prone to human error. It also doesn't help that these are all industries where there's generally a workplace uniform, meaning that AR wearables have less of a visible stigma as well, especially in industrial use cases. Even though AR isn't the most common or pervasive technology in the enterprise, it's no surprise to see AR companies targeting them. Given that they can be specifically developed for and in a given vertical, devices don't have to hit that mass consumer price point for enterprises to throw some capital expense money at a fleet of AR devices. With that comes long service contracts and steady income that can be used to fuel future development. But what'll be interesting to see is if the shift in remote work during and after the COVID-19 lockdowns will change AR from this more industrial application into further tools for remote training, collaboration, and communication. There's definitely applications for these types of AR uses. I think Microsoft is particularly well poised to pivot on them from a hardware and software perspective, but right now, they're still kind of the exception with enterprise AR. If the idea of a physical office for many employees becomes a thing of the past, I think we could see AR really pivot into enterprise remote offices. And if it does, that could soon be a gateway for AR's re-emergence on the consumer side as well. Thanks for watching this episode of Checksum. Be sure to subscribe to the Gestalt IT YouTube channel to get these and shows like our weekly look at the IT news of the week, the Gestalt IT Rundown, in your feed every week. And let us know in the comments, are you seeing AR take off in the enterprise? And do you see the rise of remote work helping to move the needle? Can't wait to hear from you. We'll talk to you next time.